and life skills education. The latter is conveyed through outreach activities from youth resource centers, currently 10 in number in the country. Worth mentioning is that the youth themselves play a leading role in the life skills education. One challenge which you are confronted with is that as collaborators in youth development, we need effective and efficient coordination and to avoid working in silos. We need to identify common problems and join hands and resources in youth development so that we can come up with visible impact to address youth issues. Youth participation is already hinted above in all youth development programs, and the need is indeed significant. I want to say that nothing for the youth without the youth themselves should always be our slogan. This briefly explains why the Ministry is currently preoccupied with paving the way for the establishment of the Lesotho National Youth Council, a driving force behind all youth development programs. The youth, in short, need to be empowered socially, politically, economically, and otherwise. For further details on youth aspirations, which will be realized through the Council, I wish to refer you to the Lesotho National Youth Policy. The Ministry also intends to facilitate the review of this policy with a view to ensuring that it fully addresses all concerns of the young people. Last but not least, I wish to sincerely thank the Global Business Roundtable Future Leaders for holding the second summit in Lesotho, and pass special thanks to Mr. Sipho Msulugu and the Lesotho Executive Committee for their significant role in making this summit a success. Having said this, I wish all gathered here successful deliberations, and please remember that without collaboration between the government and all stakeholders in youth development, we cannot fully achieve our goals and objectives in youth development. I really would just like to take a few words, maybe before I declare the summit officially open, to say a few words that come from my own heart. I am always deeply touched when I see the youth of this country rise up to participate in anything. It is impossible to be a government and to be backward-looking. Everything which we do is committed to the future of this nation. We have had the past that we've had the history that we have. What we have the power to shape is the future that we intend to have. And the custodians of that future, the people for whom that future is created for, are the young men and women who are here today. You are but a small portion of our country, but I am sure that you represent everything that is good about our country. I hope that you will use this opportunity to listen and to allow the nature of the interaction to shape what you will be about in the future. Too many of us go to business with the objective of making money, instead of understanding money as a consequence of good business. You need to be good business people. You need to be ethical. You need to have a strong moral compass. You need to have a sense of wanting to build something that will be a lasting legacy. And if you are able to achieve all of those things, there is nothing wrong with making a little money or making a lot of money as a consequence of your good work and as a consequence of your good actions. But the singular pursuit of money at the expense of all else is a dangerous road, which unfortunately too many of us have chosen to walk down. Corruption, theft, call it whatever you want to call it, is all too prevalent in our so-called business leaders. I want to believe that as a result of coming together like this, we will see not only a new generation of business leaders, but a new generation of Basotho as well, who are committed to the best principles and to the best ethics and actions. And I think that with those few humble words on my part, I would, at this juncture, wish to declare the summit officially open. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, the Honorable Minister. Sure. Yeah. Nothing for the youth without the youth. And I know that from school, they always say that with every right comes a responsibility. So it's the responsibility of the youth to stand up and be counted. Stand up and make sure that you avail yourselves to these programs which government has for the youth. Yeah, I'm still a bit taken aback from the address that we just had from the Honorable Minister. Understand money as a consequence of good business skills. I think that's something that should really sit down into every aspiring business person, every youth who aspires to become, or who aspires to get into business. Don't chase money. Our next speaker is a BCom accounting graduate from the National University of Lesotho. He holds an MBA in finance from Henley Management College. He's no stranger to the business society in Lesotho, having started his career at the Basotho Enterprise Development Corporation, BEDCO. He then moved to the National Development Corporation, LNDC, and then later moved to the Central Bank of Lesotho. His experience tells me that he knows a lot about business. He's been there. He's also a man of many firsts. He's the first founding Chief Executive Officer of Postbank Lesotho. He's also the first and youngest Lesotho Managing Director at Standard Lesotho Bank. Please help me welcome our keynote speaker, Mr. Mpho Vumbukani.
Thanks, Program Director, for the kind introduction. Good morning, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. We do thank God Almighty for making it possible for us to be here in the second Future Leaders Summit. And I will be sharing with you some of my thoughts in terms of where we are in Africa and how we can take it forward. But may I first of all be allowed to pay my respects to His Majesty King Letsie III, the Right Honorable the Prime Minister, and also acknowledge the presence of the Honorable Ministers here present. I see Dr. Majoro, Honorable Minister Munyake, and Honorable Minister Malawi, who is just taking us through a very inspiring opening remarks. Let me acknowledge the presence of the convener, Mr. Sipho Mseleku, Bishop Michael Godisa, we thank you, distinguished members of the Global Roundtable, and to all distinguished ladies and gentlemen, may I say all protocol observed and indicate that from the very onset, express my gratitude for this honor to be the keynote speaker to address you in this second Future Leaders Summit, and explain just briefly that when I was approached, I was very busy, and I felt, on the other hand, after I'd spoken to Maseru, who's the Chief Ambassador for Global Fund for Christ, that I have to make the right choice and make sure that I avail myself. And I'm very pleased that I've been able to do that. I told her that I was traveling and I was coming from Namibia, but I was able to make it on time. I have been fortunate enough to witness the launch last year of the Global Business Roundtable Future Leaders, and enjoyed the spirit, focus, and the vibe that I saw there. And I noted that the Global Roundtable is actually taking a very noble initiative to try to say, how do we work to create a better future for all of us? And isn't that more important when we put all our energy to harness our future leaders and ensure that we channel them in the right direction? From experience, I have been able to do what the program director indicated earlier, because I've been guided in the past by people who were willing to spare their time and effort to try to shape me. So we need to owe our thanks to all the leaders and all the leadership in here, which is dedicating its time to mentor, to provide the skills and the networking opportunities to the future leaders, whilst also dealing with that from a very holistic perspective, which would include the spiritual development as well, in line with God's plan. My keynote address is going to focus on the key theme, African pioneers hearing a call of the first world Africa. And from the very onset, I need to highlight the fact that leaders need to be able to be optimistic, and we need to be able to be having much broader outlook, not just thinking of your immediate environment and confining your life, if it is Lesotho in Lesotho or Swaziland, but having a much broader perspective, particularly because the world we live in today is global. So it's very important that we need to have a very broad and global outlook as we develop our young leaders. In the past, just to give the perspective of what I'm saying, Africa was looked upon as a hopeless continent. And in the headlines of one of the global magazines, we know it for, it's called The Economist. It was actually portraying the challenges that Africa was grappling with and showing how hopeless a continent it is. It's unbelievable today that from the very same Economist, we get the headline that says, Aspiring Africa, which articulates the most recent developments where Africa is now coming in the forefront from a development perspective. And every business leader wants to be in Africa and wants to share the growth opportunities that we have in Africa. The economists are indicating that Africa is the only continent that will grow more than the other continents. And I'll be sharing with you some of the perspectives in terms of where we are going. And I'll talk to where we are and where we think things will be, say, in 2050. Before focusing on the challenges and opportunities that Africa presents to all of us, I need to articulate one key thing, which is the new ethical-based leadership dimension, which we have to embed in our society. It has been mentioned of the challenges of corruption, theft, that we grapple with, and for us to be able to deal with them, ethics and principles need to come to the center. Future leaders need to have a clear understanding of that the real leadership is founded upon what they invest in themselves, in terms of their education, and knowledge is very key in this global society. Not just the knowledge, but future leaders need to appreciate that they need to have passion for what they do, be principled, and have the courage. Honorable Minister Mulapo explained the challenges that we are dealing with, and I'm sure that many of you are surprised when I talk of ethics, say, but this guy comes from the banking world. How can he tell us about ethics? We have just recently, globally, been confronted with a couple of scandals, some from Barclays in the UK, UBS in Switzerland, that were coming when the investigations are done from executives and some of the traders who were simply greedy and just wanted to maximize profits and their bonuses at the expense of everything else, including the bank's reputation. And banking by itself is the business of trust, because you don't just give away money, you put your money with people and institutions you trust. So what has happened globally cuts to the core of the challenges that we are faced with. Furthermore, the global financial crisis had its roots on some opportunistic behavior by some well-established institutions and banks in the USA. You all know that everybody has been looking up to the USA. It was number one in the economy, but it brought us the global financial crisis. And it impacted on all of us, including us here in Africa. We all know how the world suffered thereafter. I wanted to start from this perspective, such that we know that we are living in the real world, which is full of challenges. Hence, the need to focus a lot today on ethical leadership and make sure that we put that at the center of what we do. And isn't that more important for us to talk of servant ethical leadership to the future leaders? I'll just quote from one author, Seidman. He wrote a book titled How, Why, How We Do Anything Means Everything. And I'll quote a very key statement. And it says, in today's connected world, individuals, organizations that make the strongest connections win. In the past, our products and services, which defines our what, were the key to our success. Today, what has become a commodity which is easily duplicated and can be easily reverse engineered. Sustainable advantage and enduring success for both companies and people who work for them now lie with how. In the past, we were dealing with what, now The issue is how. Today, how we behave and interact with others is the ultimate differentiator. The qualities that were once thought of as soft, such as integrity, passion, humility, and truth, have become the hard currency of business success and the most powerful drivers of reputation and profitability. We have in the banking world have tried to adopt this notion and try to introduce concepts like having strong relationships with our clients and have relationship managers. This is on the back of the point I highlighted earlier that money is a very sensitive subject and a very emotional subject. And people want to deal with people that they trust. So it says what we do in our banking world, it's all key to make sure that we preserve that trust. This doesn't only talk to ourselves in the banking world, but it's a challenge to our future leaders to know these new dimensions as you will be venturing into the world of business. I intend to share with you the Afro Macro Insight and Strategy. This is the research that we have done as Standard Bank Group. Standard Lesotho Bank is part of Standard Bank Group, and I'll be sharing with you some of the insights that we have done from a group perspective. And this do not only talk to our environment in Lesotho, but to Africa as the theme of today's summit. The research outlines 5 key trends that are powering Africa to the future, and I'll just unpack these 5 most prominent trends which are driving Africa's ongoing economic and commercial reinvigoration. And I'll just highlight these 4 key themes as follows. The first trend that we are noting is that going forward, there will be a larger, younger, and more affluent population. That's in the next years to 2050. Africa's transformational urban swell out of urbanization that we are realizing will be a key issue in terms of how economies will be defined. Technology. And Africa, because it has been lagging behind, from a technology perspective, it is leapfrogging in terms of development. And the true story is what we see in the mobile banking world, or in mobile or cell phone technologies. Africa is well endowed with resources. The issue is we have always been asked whether it's a curse or it presents opportunities to us. And unpacking these resources is all a function of leadership. Last but not least, I'll just highlight to you Africa's need to deepen the financial sector and opportunities that will come out of that. As we always say, that the financial sector is the oil that drives the engine when the engine is defined as the private sector. Now, dealing with the first trend in terms of younger and more affluent population in the continent, I'll just unpack a couple of key points that the continent's population has grown by 200 million to exceed 1 billion. And by 2050, the population would be 2 billion. This gives Africa what is called a demographic dividend in terms of the people that, if nurtured properly to be involved in the economic environment, can make a great difference. The workforce by 2050 will be 1.2 billion Africans of working age, meaning that 1 in 4 workers in the world will be African, compared to 1 in 8, which will be from China. And this would be reversing the current trend. as I said, Africa, we're lagging behind, but we need to have a very optimistic view going forward. Yet, to realize this demographic dividend, there are a number of preconditions that we need to deal with. And these include ensuring that we have strong institutions that can take us forward, instead of strong men, as has been the trend since independence of most of our countries. Derek Bock from Harvard University stated that, and I quote, "If you think education is expensive, try ignorance." It therefore says this message is powerful to our future leaders to say, we need to ensure that we invest in education, and not just education, but education that can enable our future leaders to compete in this global world. Political and economic freedom must also be supportive. And I'll quote a very controversial author in terms of the key issues that he highlights when dealing with Africa. I've always felt that some of these provocative issues help us realize some of the challenges that we have and be able to deal with them. He has a book called Why Africa is Poor and What Africans Can Do About It. And it highlights the main reasons why Africa's people are poor, and he put it straight to the leadership, and that it is out of our choice, because our leaders reflect ourselves, our societies. I need to be quick when I talk about this, that when I talk of this leadership, it's not just about the political leadership, it is all of us. It talks to me personally in my leadership role in the banking world, to make sure that I provide clear and proper direction in the financial sector, which is founded on ethical leadership. The second most notable trend in Africa is that the population is increasing with the urbanization, where people move from rural areas to urban areas. Much as this presents an opportunity, there are challenges in terms of the infrastructure that we have in Africa, whether it can be able to enable us to take advantage of these opportunities. And this is what now calls for what I call transformational leadership, which needs to be serious in embarking upon reforms that can take us to the future. And I need to emphasize that we need a lot more transformational leaders and less of transactional leaders that we have. The third key trend is leapfrogging through technology. And I must say this is most relevant to the summit, as we know that youth has well embraced technology. And research has proved that across the world, technological enhancements are fundamentally altering the way individuals and business connect, communicate, and transact. Unlike in the past, where Africa was left stranded with technology, things are changing. Internet penetration is relatively low, but growth rates has been quite profound. Between 2000 and 2011, internet usage in Africa grew by 2,527%, compared to the world's average of 480%. Africans are eagerly embracing social media as a means of sustaining and building relationships. Africa has been pioneering innovative solutions, and the most notable example in the banking world is the M-Pesa system that was launched in Kenya in 2007 to facilitate money transfer through cell phones. And in the year 2010, 14 million Kenyans had transferred almost $7 billion out of this M-Pesa solution, which is where mobile banking was facilitated through technology to make sure that financial services are accessed by most people. This clearly has fundamentally changed the way banking used to be done, from the traditional branches to the electronic channels, including mobile phones. And indeed, mobile telephony has been a good transformative story for Africa, wherein we have taken the pioneering role in some instances. And I think this deserves a round of applause. I'm always careful that one of our problems in Africa is we look down upon ourselves too much, and we never celebrate the great achievements that we have had. So it's always important that as and when there are great achievements, that we have to celebrate them. The fourth key trend that I intend to share with you from this research revolves around the fact that Africa, I've already mentioned, is well endowed with natural resources. New discoveries of natural resources are raising Africa's profile globally. Investment is key in unlocking this potential, coupled with renewed government policy vigor. And this calls for leadership from both the business world as well as from the government space. Greg Mills, that I quoted earlier, acknowledged that Africa is poor not because it lacks natural resources, but due to the fact that these natural resources have been used historically to benefit a few elites who effectively spread corrupt practices, diverted development energy, and the focus of their people with the wrong incentives. We need to change this paradigm as African leaders for the benefit of our future generations. So it is very important for our future leaders to note that we are not poor as Africa because we lack resources, but it is out of the choices that we've made in the past, and we need to change the paradigm. For future leaders to be able to do this, there's need for appreciation that you need to have a purpose in terms of the way we think and the way we behave. And I'll quote from Brian Parsley in the article titled Leading Edge. And he clearly articulates this point that we all have choices. Sometimes we make good ones, at other times we make bad choices. However, we have the ability to reduce the number of our bad choices, if only we can live by our decisions with purpose and reshape the way we anchor our purpose in terms of principles and ethics. This therefore says we should avoid living our lives by default. It's a very critical statement. Future leaders need to know that you need to make the right choices and not just live by chance, not just live by default. I'm highlighting this point so that as future leaders are mentored, they fully appreciate that we are living in the real world, which is full of challenges, and we need to direct and structure our lives properly. And one of the challenges that we have is we have societies that are very good in terms of whining and complaining. Instead of moving to the next process, if this is a challenge, what are the solutions that we need to deal with? And Brian, that I quoted earlier when emphasizing this leadership with purpose, highlights that we all know that whining and complaining